Hi everyone, welcome to INACOL's Teacher Talk for January 2013. OER in the classroom. We have two outstanding presenters today. Annie Swinton, who is a math teacher with the Open High School of Utah, and Jared Robinson, who is pinch hitting for TJ Bliss, our INACOL OER Fellow, who works in the Brigham Young University Open Education Group. So they're both going to be presenting a little bit about OERs. With that, I'm going to turn the microphone over. You know what, just before I turn over the microphone, let me just say that if you've got any questions as we're going along, just type them into the chat room. We're a small group, so that makes it easy for all of us to interact. You can click on the talk button or type things in the chat room as we're going along. So with that, Jared, I'm going to turn it over to you and advance it to your first slide, and then you take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. I'll just give you a little bit of background about me and where I'm coming from. I'm Jared Robinson. I do work here at Brigham Young University. I'm a member of the Open Education Group, but that's not my background. My background is as an English teacher, a high school English teacher in Colorado, where I worked for 6 years and really loved it. Education is really important and was a lot of fun and had a great experience and taught at a really great school. I have been back at BYU for 1.5 years now working on my PhD. I was recently hired as research faculty full-time studying the effects of open textbooks on student learning. So now I'm working on my PhD part-time, and my dissertation work is focusing on open textbooks and the effects that they have on student learning, particularly at the community college level, although I am doing research on what's happening at the high school level as well. And I went ahead and I put a link on my website. Like Rob said, I'm pinch hitting today for TJ Bliss, who is the INACOL OER Policy Fellow. His contact information is there as well, and he's sad that he can't be here. He's on a flight to the Ukraine as we speak, and his dissertation research is on student perceptions of open online textbooks, and he's found some really interesting things about what students find to be important qualities of good open online textbooks. And he asked me to encourage anyone who wanted to talk about OER policy or how they can advance OER policy either in their school or in their region to contact him. And I know that he would be really anxious to interact with anyone who wants to do that. I'm using some content from his slides, so forgive me if I branch off and talk about things that I think are important as we go as well, and we'll do that. All right, the first idea for open education I think is really important is this idea that education is sharing, and that's one of the reasons that I was really excited about becoming a teacher. I began as pre-law and was pretty determined that was the course that I was going to go through, but found the competition really changed how I pictured myself, that in order for me to succeed, other people had to fail, that I had to do better than other people and compete with them, and my success was contingent on that. I love about education that if I'm going to succeed as an educator or someone who cares about education, other people have to succeed as well. I have to share what I know. I can't be jealous of it. And education is all about sharing, and that's really, really important. Teachers share with students, of course. They share knowledge and skills, feedback and criticism, encouragement. They also share access to different communities of practice. What it's like to be, in my case, a student of literature or a discusser of literature or a creator of literature. What it's like to be a biologist, a scientist. And this sharing is really important. There are other disciplines as well. I mean, all across the range from performing arts to mathematics, social studies. Sharing is the key for what we do. One of the things that I've enjoyed that's been a real movement is the ability for students to share with teachers as well. In our classes, students are increasingly involved in people talk about the constructivism and the construction of knowledge. Students are involved in teaching one another, in contributing to knowledge and helping even write assignments and tests. And there's a lot of really great opportunities that come with empowering students with the opportunity to share. And so this idea is that sharing is so important that it should be fundamental to what we're doing in education. And I know in my department, successful educators want to share the most completely with each other and with the most students. And TJ posits that knowledge is magical, and that sounds really nice, but that we really can share without losing anything ourselves. The thing about knowledge is that physical expressions of that knowledge are not necessarily always shareable in the exact same way. For example, if I want to give you a copy of a book, I have to actually give it to you. They are commodities that are purchased, and they're finite. They're finite commodities that we associate with education. And in public schooling, textbooks end up being one of those commodities. It's a finite commodity. There's only a limited amount of them, and because of that, it's a cost associated with education. But when we can take those same expressions of knowledge and those same access to content and make them digital, we can share them in some of the same ways that we can share ideas, and they're not finite anymore, and there's some other things that we can do with those as well. So, I mean, this is the difference between the newspaper and the internet and distribution, and certainly news is an arena which has had to really change its model and how it views information and the distribution of information. This is really a unique time when it comes to sharing information, and information is more readily available now than it has ever been before. My 7-year-old son has access to more information sitting down at the computer than I had access to when I was a freshman in college some 15 years ago. So it really is a pretty remarkable time, and we have the ability to take advantage of this as educators. We have the ability to give away both knowledge and expressions of knowledge, and to share these freely with other people. The problem, well, the opportunity is that we can educate in different ways than we've educated before. We can do things that we haven't been able to do before. So if we share something online, that would mean copying and distributing it. And this is significantly less expensive than copying a 250-page book by hand, say, or by print on demand. If we copy by computer, we can reduce the cost to almost nothing. Distributing a book also reduces the cost. We don't have to pay postage. We pay a cost, but it's a very small cost comparatively. And this is a really important advancement. In education, it also means that we have the ability to adapt and edit our text. And this is a significant improvement, because if you have a mistake, say in a textbook edition, it takes years and lots of money to fix that mistake and come out with a new edition. When we have online materials that are open, it also means that we can adapt and edit instantly, and that we can adapt to the needs of our students. This gives students unprecedented ability to engage in sense meeting and meaning making, relating things to past experience, presenting things in a language that's most appropriate for students in certain regions of the country or regions of the world. And really, editing can be free, which is really different than what happens with printed books or magazines, and it can happen quickly and inexpensively. We have the ability to share as never before. But one problem, and one thing that is a barrier to this sharing and to this distribution of information to all people, regardless of their ability to pay for that, is copyright. And traditional copyright forbids copying, distributing, and editing of material. So if you have an online book that's copyrighted, you don't have the right to freely distribute it or edit it or change it for the needs of your students. And this could be seen as a really significant barrier. The copyright model cancels possibilities of digital media and the internet, It can cancel some of the possibilities that we have as educators to take advantage of these powerful tools at our fingertips. And so in some ways we see this conflict between what the internet enables us to do and copyright forbids us to do, and it presents somewhat of a conundrum. And that's where Creative Commons comes in, which is a way to use copyright to enforce sharing, to enable sharing. The first time I was introduced to Creative Commons was as a teacher. We actually were taught a book by an author named Cory Doctorow, who publishes all of his books under a Creative Commons license and makes his novels available free on the internet. And it was a really interesting thing. I didn't know a lot about it at the time, but it was something that got me intrigued. And as I came in and began my doctoral work, it was something that kept popping up over and over again, and it's something that I've really enjoyed delving into and found real meaning in. When we're talking about open educational resources, these are resources that have been licensed with a Creative Commons license. And this guarantees, with certain versions of the Creative Commons license, access to the 4 R's of openly licensed textbooks and open educational resources. The right to reuse, to copy verbatim for free, and to just use the text as it was created by the author. The right to redistribute or to share freely with others. The right to revise, to adapt and edit to the needs of our individual students. And the right to remix, to combine with other texts, and to have the synergy that comes with that. So there are different kinds of CC licenses, and the most, they're ordered here. These kinds are ordered by the least restrictive on the top, which is CC BY, and then the most restrictive of the Creative Commons licenses on the bottom, which is CC BY NC-SA. And if you're interested in that, there are lots of resources that can take you through that. That's not where I want to spend time, though. There were over 400 million items using CC licenses at the end of 2010 worldwide, and it's growing at a very, very fast rate. For example, Wikipedia and the kind of knowledge sharing that happens at Wikipedia is made possible through the Creative Commons license. And you'll see at the bottom of every Wikipedia page, there's CC license. And this opportunity for sharing has created a resource and a richness of information that is unprecedented and just, I think, really neat to think about people collaborating to create knowledge in a way that's not possessing knowledge, that's sharing and recognizing that knowledge belongs to the world. There are also different organizations besides, like, say, Wikipedia, that use open knowledge, and it creates all kinds of possibilities. So the open and open educational resources is free permission to do the 4 R's. What the internet enables, OER then allows, and we're able to share and educate at an unprecedented scale. One example of this is here in Utah. We have a set of science teachers who teach biology, physical science, and chemistry, and they got together and adopted an open textbook from, they adopted one of the open textbooks from CK12, and, sorry, I'll go back there, and they were able to take the textbook and include only the chapters that were relevant to them. They would provide copies to each of their students, so their students were able to either annotate online, or they actually paid $5 per copy and gave every student a hard copy that they could annotate in the hard copy version as well. So students had real access to knowledge, access to interact with that. Teachers adapted the books based off of feedback from students to make a more powerful product for students and to engage students in the process of being able to be a part of the creation of information. So this is some of the work that TJ is doing with his INA call and OER Policy Fellowship. He's looking at OER policy models, strategies, and recommendations, which is practical guides for policymakers related to the policies supporting adoption, use, and the development of OER. And then There's the OER Collaborative Development Guide, which is a practical use for states, districts, and schools for content development in the context of the Common Core, which presents a lot of opportunities. I think open educational resources are particularly important at the K-12 level, where lots and lots of taxpayer dollars are spent on textbooks all the time, and to the extent that we have these resources available, or we're willing to invest the time to make resources and make them available, we have the ability to spend money where it's likely to make the biggest difference, rather than spending money over and over and over again on new versions of textbooks. So there are some things going on with OER policy. So for example, right now, Utah has a shift to open policy, and right now the implementation of the science curriculum and open educational resources is going statewide, where we have support from the state government to implement open textbooks in classrooms, and teachers are working together and working as we speak to implement this and to take the small scale OER adoption by one district and to make that statewide. So if you are aware of past or current content development initiatives that use open educational resources, INA calls interested in that, and you can get in touch with TJ. And his email address again is tjbliss@gmail.com, and his website is tjbliss.org. Arizona has also had examples of collaborating to develop and adopt open textbooks for high school math and science. And so a couple of other things, if you're thinking about adopting OER, you might think that not all textbooks are created equal, and that's the same for open educational content. So you might take a look at some of the curricular relevance of the materials, the completeness, the alignment with standards, the quality, audience, and editorial maintenance, just like you do for any textbook. You're also interested in looking at customization options and the things that you're able to do. And that's one of the neat things about online delivery, is the ability to have, say, search functions and the ability to find material quickly that way. Also pay attention to the source and make sure that the material that you're using is licensed for open use, and that the way that you're using it is consistent with the nature of the license. And then the last slide here, the last two slides, are projects and resources that are OER projects or repositories, courses, or courseware. So there are several here that you can take a look at your leisure. And hope I'm not moving too fast, but we'll go through to the next slide as well, which is other open textbook projects. Just a note here, Flat World Knowledge has recently put their books behind a firewall, so they're no longer open, although those books that were created under the open license are still openly licensed, and they're available through the Saylor Foundation, so Flat World Knowledge books are still available, but they have moved their business model to a cheap textbook, not an open textbook model, and I guess that's germane to our conversation today. Here are a couple of other resources that you can take a look at that are either related tangentially or operate through Creative Commons licenses. And it's been really great to talk with you. I'll be excited to take any questions at the end. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thanks, Jared. And now we get to hear how you put all those OER things into practice from Annie. Annie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'm happy to share with you guys today what I've learned. And as you probably noticed in those previous slides, it talked a lot about the Open High School of Utah. And I've been privileged to be a part of the school for 2 years. This is my second year teaching online. It is my 10th year teaching. And I have a few jobs, as all teachers do at Open High School. I get to teach AP Calculus and Secondary Math 2, which is the integrated pathway for the Common Core, which Utah has adopted. We also at Open High School are all curriculum writers. So they go through a pretty intense screening process to hire teachers. Again, because we are all certified teachers, but we write the curriculum as we go. And you saw in Jared's slides that part of Open High School's charter is that we rely almost entirely on OER, which to me was completely new. So I taught for 8 years. I totally thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was up with the times. I was, all over this digital stuff, but I was totally out of my element for the first couple of months because I really wasn't familiar with OER, and I wasn't familiar with how to find it and, what to do with it. So that's what I hope to share a little bit today. Open High School is a completely online public charter school, and we have students currently in grades 9 through 12, but we are adding 7th and 8th graders next year, which should be really interesting and pretty fun. We have students from really a wide variety of backgrounds. This year I have a student who lives in Switzerland. There's one who lives in China. They just have to be Utah residents. Because there's so many Olympic athletes here, I actually have several Olympic athletes in my classes, which is really fun. So let's move on to our next one. So here's what I learned when I started working at Open High School. Selecting OER can be insane. And I'm sure if you've ever tried any of these searches, you feel like you're in over your head when you first get into it. And at least that's how I felt. And I know some of the others at my school felt the same way because there's so much out there, and it's so hard to know, where do I start? What do I even look for? Because you could spend weeks, months, years searching through this OER trying to figure out exactly what's going to work for you. And it can really become overwhelming. So I'm lucky that I hopped into Open High School 2 years after they opened. And so what we do as a school is we have a preferred list. And so we use Google Docs or Google Apps at our school. And so we use Google Doc to share our preferred list. And what that looks like is our curriculum director has gone through over the last couple of years, and she finds everything. And she just kind of looks through it at first and says, okay, this stuff's worth looking at, and this stuff's really not worth looking at. And then as teachers, I can go to that list and say, okay, this week I'm teaching a lesson on graphing. And so I'll jet to the list and I'll say, okay, which of these sites are going to fit what I need? And I'll pick a couple and I'll search for graphing. And that's how I go about it, because it really can be incredibly intimidating to go and find the perfect thing for your course. And we are very selective about what we use. Down here I talk about evaluating our courses. And we spend a lot of time going through our courses each day, at the end of each week, just like any teacher would in the classroom, making notes on your lesson plans, only my lesson plans are completely online, and they're resources that students access from home. And so we go through at the end of, again, each day, each week, and then at the end of the quarter, we do a comprehensive course review, where I go back and I say, okay, was that working? Did that target the goals that I wanted? And then we do a peer review of each other's courses, which is kind of crazy at first and a little bit hard to open up your course for someone else to evaluate. But it really helps us hone in on the resources that do exactly what we want them to do. We also have a teacher forum on our LMS. We use Moodle. And we have a teacher share forum, which is really fun. So a teacher will get on and say, hey, I found this really cool site today, or I found this really cool resource, which is fun because then we can all go look back through it and you can search it, which is really nice. And it's a great way for our teachers to share with each other. And one big thing that I learned is that our courses are never static. So every day I go through and I'm looking for, again, resources that work, resources that don't work, things that I can change, things that I can make better. And it's all data-driven. And I'm sure you guys know that's the nice thing about having an LMS, because it's right there. You can look up so many different reports. Is the question working? Are these students using this resource? How much time are they spending on this resource? And that has been huge for me to determine what's working and what's not working. Now, for our use of OER, like I've said before, our courses are entirely built out of OER. And so what we do is we go out and we find resources so that we can reach all of the learning styles, because that really is difficult in an online setting, to know what's going to work for one student when I don't actually get to see their face and I don't know, from their physical response whether it's working or not. And so we have, in each of our lessons, we have a reading component. We have videos, we find interactives, we have guided practice and independent practice. And some of the videos are things we just make ourselves. So if the perfect video is not out there, then I just go ahead and make it. And they're by no means professional. They're just what I can do with my webcam and my headset and my pen tablet, but it tends to work really well. We found that it's best to embed this OER into our courses, because we find that when we have external links to these resources, that once students leave the site, it's really hard for them to come back. Because when they start exploring, they're like, oh, I wonder what this is over here, and I should go look at this over here. And so we found it's really nice to be able to embed these resources. And we're big on using iframes. I just use an iframe generator, and it's a really great way to bring an external resource into my course. And then the last thing that I found about using the OER is that explicit instructions are so incredibly important, especially again in an online setting where I'm not there to say this is exactly how to do it. And I'm looking at their faces saying, oh, they don't understand that, or they got it, or maybe they half understand that. And so we write everything out, and we do it all quarter long, all year long. That way a student at the end of the year still sees these are the steps for submitting a Google Doc, which actually is kind of funny at the end of the year, because like, oh, I know how to do this. I don't need it anymore. But we find that having very explicit instructions makes it so much easier to implement all of these different resources because they all look different. So here's an example from our website of how we do it. So on the left here, we have a Khan Academy video embedded in the course. And those are so great because they already have the embed codes. You just right-click on it, and there's your embed code. You pop it in. And then students can go ahead and watch the video without being distracted by other videos on YouTube or other videos if you sent them to the Khan Academy site. It's just right there for them. They can click back through all the links to their courses. And then we use a lot of NROC materials. And if you're not familiar with them, it's the National Repository of Online Courses. And we use a lot of their materials in class, and we use those as pop-ups, again, so we're not sending them to some external link, which makes such a huge difference. Then to finish up here, I just wanted to show you my quick list, because I know as a teacher, sometimes it just gets to that last minute where you think, oh my gosh, there's just so many resources out there. Where do I even start? This is where I start. I start with these 6 resources, and honestly, I find 95% of what I use from these 6 resources. CK12 is where I get all of the material I use for the reading portions of the lessons. They have fantastic graphics. Again, I'm sure you guys have used them. They're so great to use their Flexbooks to edit, move things around, take things out. A lot of our videos come from Khan Academy, which is really nice because he really has everything on there. And so we use lots and lots of Khan Academy videos. We use a lot of materials from Hippocampus and NROC, which, again, these are great because they have really short videos, which I find my high school students appreciate, a nice short video. They also have practice problems and review problems that give them feedback, which is so nice that they can go through that as they're learning the material. Guru Learning I love because you can Google it and it separates it out into types of activities. So there's videos, there's interactive, there's web pages. SAS Curriculum Pathways, again, is fantastic. It has the same sort of setup, but they have built-in lesson plans, which are actually really cool. And then Brain Genie I love because students can go set goals for themselves and they can go practice those. They can compete with each other, which is kind of funny and kind of fun for them because it gives them a different aspect, especially with these students who are at home. So let me jet over to the chat here. Let's see. Okay, so our school first started with 9th graders. And so when we started, again, we just said, as a whole curriculum, we said we want everything to be OER. So we built our courses from the ground up. Now, I don't know if the question was geared towards like specific resources or just as a course in general, because all of our courses are built that way. Let's see. In general, okay. Yeah, so every single resource we put in our courses, we want to be OER. We truly don't pay for anything in our school because it's out there. The resources really are out there and available to share. So every single one of our courses and all of our curriculum is built off of these resources. So we take the state core, we set our goals and objectives, and then we go out and we find what we need to put in. And then in my specific courses, as I'm going through, again, I take those objectives and I go out and I just start searching. I search these different sites. And some things I look at them and I think, oh, that might fit, that might not fit. And then I just kind of hone it down from there until it ends up being my semi-finished product, because it really never is finished. I'm always going to update. I'm always going to change. I'm always going to find new things, which is kind of fun. I hope that answers the question.
So Annie, this is Rob. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, first of all, the system within which you put those OERs, and then secondly, what decisions were made early on about the structure of what those courses were like. For example, do you have an objective in every lesson? Do you write that out? And then how often are you guys rewriting your curriculum as teachers? So it's kind of that whole package of, if somebody was just starting out, what would they start with? What's your structure? What's your course management system, and then how often are you redoing your course?
Okay, so our course management system is Moodle, and we've actually been through a couple, but that's the one that we found to be most user-friendly for our purposes. So this summer, I sat down and I wrote the Math 2 class. So what I did was like I said, I just pull up the state core, and then I sat down with a lesson and I started with the objectives. And we want, in our courses, we've decided for our school it's best if all the courses across all of the content areas look the same. Okay, again, of course, my math class isn't going to be the same as a history class, but we want them to look the same so a student knows, okay, underneath my heading, I'm going to have something that I can read or a video I can watch, and then an assignment I'm going to complete. So we have a system that was set up by our curriculum director who laid out, this is exactly the templates I want you to use. These are the approved resources that we want you to use. Yes, so it is a common template, which is really nice. And like I said, our curriculum director put that together because at first it just kind of was a free-for-all because we didn't really know what we were doing. And then as we started to realize, okay, it's easier for a student to go from course to course if they know what to expect and they know where to find things. So again, that was where my process started. So I started from the template. I would find my lesson objectives, and we are required to have lesson objectives at the top of every lesson, which I think is good practice because it helps guide me as I'm writing the curriculum, and it helps our students as they're going through saying, okay, what am I going to learn today, which is really nice. And then I would set out to, again, I would start with my favorite 6 OER sites, and I would just search and dig through the resources, and I would say, okay, this really fits exactly what my objective is. So I'll pull in this video, and I'll pull in this piece of a Flexbook from CK12. And here's a really cool interactive from SAS Curriculum Pathways. And I would put that all together. Now, we don't usually rewrite our courses once they're done, like a complete overhaul. It's happened a couple of times. But again, it's just little tweaks here and there where I can look at a lesson and say, wow, this student scored really low on this section. The resources in there really must not be helping. And so at that point, then I would go back and I may scrap it and totally rewrite the lesson. Or I may tweak just a few of the resources to see, is this one going to work better, or does this meet my objective better? Are the questions I wrote in the assignment good questions? So yeah, so that's pretty much how we go about it from start to finish. Let's see, let me read over here in the chat. Yeah, it's kind of fun. We get to talk to a lot of other schools about what we do, and I love doing that. And we have a website where we share all of our completed courses. So at the end of the year, our curriculum director goes through and she updates the courses. And I don't even remember where the website where they're housed. I think it's, I really don't remember. That's sad. I should probably know that. And the full courses are out there, minus the assignments. Because we figure every school is going to want to do their own assignments, and we share stuff like that all the time, which is really nice. For our school, we actually just use teacher-made assessments. At some point, we're hoping that the state will have some additional information with the new Common Core. But at this point, we do just the teachers make the assessments, and then we use the item analytics in Moodle to help us determine, okay, that question just wasn't good, or this really isn't assessing what I want to. So yeah, it is teacher written, but it's fluid. We're constantly analyzing to see if we could do it better. Oh, thanks. Yeah, there's our Open High School Courseware site where we share our courses. And that happens at the end of every school year.
Annie, there was another question in here that talks about, oh yeah, you talked about sharing lessons. Okay, great. So could you take us through a little bit, so you said you wrote math, I forget what math class you said you wrote last summer. So are you compensated for that? And then, you know, what's that compensation look like? And then secondly, how long did it take? And when you're putting that together, are you copying and pasting ideas into a Word document and then putting them into Moodle, or are you writing out, you know, some beginnings of each lesson and then finding the resources? You know, kind of walk us through that process that you went through last summer and how long it took. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, it's really nice. We are compensated separately for being curriculum writers, which is fantastic because it does take a lot of time. If you sit down and write a whole course from start to finish, it's brutal. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to do it from scratch. I was lucky enough that Secondary Math 2 is actually just kind of a jumble of a little bit of Algebra 1, a huge hunk of geometry, and a little bit of Algebra 2. And so I was lucky because I actually just started with my outline. So I did everything in Moodle. I don't know, I'm just not a Word document person because I just threw everything in Moodle and then deleted as I went along and added as I went along. So I started by setting out my headings, setting out my lessons and objectives, and then I just moved everything over from those other classes and then started deleting. But even with that, where I wasn't starting from scratch and I already did have most of the resources, it took me most of the summer working every day to get it done. So yeah, it definitely is a time-consuming process to sit down and write a whole course. Any other questions I missed in there?
So is every teacher that teaches at your school also the developer of their curriculum?
Most are. We have gotten big enough this year. We started with 4 teachers 4 years ago, and now there are 22, 23, somewhere in that neighborhood. And most of us who started in the first 3 years wrote the courses that we're teaching now. But we did add some extra teachers this year who are just teaching and then, you know, just tweaking the curriculum on the side rather than writing whole new courses.
And maybe I'll switch back to Garrett and ask him from the OER perspective, philosophy, so to speak, that, you know, the idea of teachers writing their own courses and then teaching with it, how does that fit or not fit, you know, the OER philosophy?
Well, I think it very much does fit the OER philosophy. I think one of the great things about OER is that it's empowering to teachers, where so much of the dialogue and legislation and policy seems to go in the other direction. That is, to take power away from teachers. And I think OER grants that the people who are closest to the students are well equipped to help them and to make decisions that will facilitate their learning. If you don't trust the teacher, you don't give them the ability to use flex materials and to because you don't think that's going to lead to a good product. But in an environment where you trust teachers and where you trust that the best teaching happens, where teachers are able to make decisions based on the students that they interact with, either online or face-to-face, that's an empowering environment, and one where students get an experience that's actually personalized to their needs. OER gives the ability to do that. I think those things fit well together.
So Andy, do you want to answer that question that Chris asked in the chat room there?
Sure. So if you didn't see the question before, he asked how many students we average. And at Open High, we average 100 to 150 students per teacher. Right now, our student population, I think we're about 380. And with the change in semester next week, I think we're getting a bunch more. So we might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 right now. And we're a little bit off on our student-to-teacher enrollment right now. We're a little bit low because one teacher from each department is actually doing half-time teaching and then half-time curriculum writing during the year, which has been kind of interesting this year. We hadn't tried that before.
And
I also
Chris, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I have a comment too about what was stated before about the benefit of having OER materials, and that teachers can pull as needed depending on the need of what those students are having. And I'm a developer. That's what I've done for a long time. I'm also a science teacher. And what I found and have continued to find that when you have a great teacher who knows the content, knows their curriculum, and has a good understanding on how students are able to learn in an online environment, then yes, I 100% agree. But as this ramping up kind of process that we're seeing throughout multiple states about trying to hurry up and get as many kids online as possible, I get a little concerned because I've also seen that go the opposite way. That people are advocating for we can have better online material and we can get more kids online and experience it, but if they don't back it with someone who knows what they're talking about in terms of those resources, knowing how to teach and knowing the pedagogical understanding of what happens in an online world, then I think that can go awry there, and you could have this random, incoherent kind of course that just has pieces and bits and parts from multiple different sources, and there's no coherence as you move through it. There's no story that's being told.
So this is Garrett here, and I'll respond to that. And thanks for your comment, Chris. And I do agree with you that and that's true about anything, right? The pedagogy is still important, and pedagogy that matches the delivery mechanism is really important. I guess one of the things that I think is interesting about OER in general is that a lot of the teachers that I've worked with have applied it in online schools, but I have worked with a number of teachers who use OER as the primary content delivery mechanism as far as texts go for their traditional face-to-face classes. And insofar as they do that, they're able to access a lot of the benefits of that openness in a pedagogical situation that they're very familiar with, and they can use some of the same pedagogy, if not most of the same pedagogy that they've used throughout the rest of their career as well. I don't know, that's not to rebut what you're saying at all, but I don't, it's interesting that online or the open content, even if it is online, can still be used in classes that meet primarily face-to-face.
Chris, did you get your question answered about the student population? So since it sounds like we've got most of the questions answered, Annie and TJ, so let me just frame this question this way. So, online learning, the way it is now, is about 12 years old. It's only been around for like 12 years. And of course, OER's developed after that, so maybe it's 5 or 6 years old at this point in time. So as each one of you separately look, say, 5 years into the future, and you're looking back on what has been accomplished, where do you see OERs being 5 years from now?
Annie, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. Well, from my perspective, now that I've been completely immersed in this program that uses OER, I just hope that more people kind of get on that wagon, regardless of whether they're online, whether they're in a face-to-face or a blended situation. Because I did teach in a classroom for 8 years, And a lot of times it just was, the textbook I had in my hand. And I would try to Google other resources, but it always, it wasn't always what I wanted or what I was looking for. I didn't have a lot of time to go and find additional resources. And I'm hoping now that these are becoming more available and that things are getting better and there's ways to, search for exactly what you need, that in 5 years from now, it will have transformed how we do things in education. I just, last year or 2 years ago, I taught chemistry at a local high school, and I had $2,000 in textbooks that didn't get returned at the end of the year, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is insane. This costs so much money. But now that Utah's kind of jumped on board with using Flexbooks and open resources, how great would that be if a student could just take it and write in the margins and it be theirs, and it's not a big deal because it wasn't a $150 textbook. That there are additional resources out there they can bring in. So I'm hoping that 5 years from now we look back and say, hey, you know what, this is really cool. It's really transformed how we're doing things in education.
Thanks. This is Garrett again. I'll take a stab as well. I'm really interested in this. In the time that I've been studying open education for the past, I've been actively involved in this for the past 6 months. And now I've made it the subject of my dissertation research. It seems to me that it is very much expanding and growing. And I was on in a meeting with David Wiley, who works with Open High School and is also the head of the Open Education Group here at BYU, and he's just was presenting in California, and districts in California are very interested in adopting. I think that the number of adopters is increasing, and the number of resources is increasing, and the more people adopt, the easier it is to pull together resources to create open educational materials and OER that is increasingly competitive with textbooks, and also has some clear advantages to that. It's pretty interesting to see how Wikipedia has grown just in the last 5 years, and how perceptions of Wikipedia have changed in the last 5 years. I know as an English teacher, Wikipedia used to be a hiss and a byword among my colleagues, and maybe maybe I felt that way too. But I don't know of too many people who feel that same way, who have those same biases, that things are changing. And as more people are interested in adopting, and more people are interested in contributing and being contributors as well as adopters, I think this has really radical implications for education. I think about public education where schools and governments pay for textbook costs. I also think about higher education where students pay for textbook costs, and where the cost of education is rising faster than inflation, faster than almost any other sector, and we have this ability to help keep our college students from being in so much debt, and to help make education freely available to people regardless of of where they're coming from and how much money they have. And that is so good.
So on behalf of INACOL, I want to thank both Annie and Jared shared their expertise with this. In the chat room, I'm putting the link to our evaluation of this webinar so you have it. Know that INACOL is in the process with TJ Bliss of publishing information about OERs and OER policies across the nation that hopefully will be out later in May or June. So we look forward to sharing that with everybody as well. So once again, thanks Annie and Jared for pitch hitting for TJ, and it was a great bit of information for all of us. And thanks to those of you attending, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thanks and good night.